Hey there. I'm going to share with you a article that I've read about mass psychogenic illness, historically known as mass hysteria, which is apparently making a comeback, which is related to the apparent outbreak of mass hysteria in a school in Leroy in America, where up to 16 girls all of a sudden, due to unexplained circumstances, developed these tics and these motor tics and stutters, and this entire investigation was being made. And so now this article writes about how mass hysteria is making a comeback because there's apparently been more cases such as this reported, where they're now investigating the role that social media is playing within it all, where they use the term um, conversion disorder. Um, Conversion disorder, where basically you develop a physical experience, or like a physical illness based on anxiety, which is like basically anxiety symptoms developing itself into like a physical nuisance and disease or illness, which is apparently contagious within an mass hysteria. And so what these guys found, and which is interesting and which I wanted to share in this interview, is that what they found is that it's mostly women who suffer from this condition, from mass hysteria, and how the interview or the article writes about all the scientific research that's been conducted to try and find the reason why this happened, and the reason why these women are experiencing it, and what mass hysteria is, or why they're experiencing anxiety, and why it develops into a physical symptom, and why it is that it's only, or it seems to be primarily a female illness or female phenomenon. And so it's like they don't really know, and when they come across someone who suddenly develops these Tourette-like symptoms, they basically send her to a doctor, which then prescribes medications for anxiety, for instance, I don't know, Valium or something, to apparently be able to deal with and cure the anxiety. Where it's fascinating how in no way is there any understanding of how this anxiety develops, or where it actually comes from, and especially why it is, or how it is that mostly females suffer from this kind of social disease of this contagious convulsion disorder of like mass hysteria. Why is that only for females? It's like, what is absolutely fascinating within reading this article is to see and realize just how little understanding there is in the scientific community with regards to our own mind. Like, how does our own mind work? We don't even know that, which is like a basic understanding that should be inherent to who we are, where we should be able to simply look inside of ourselves and see where exactly our fears come from, and see our own starting point within our own inner experiences. But where the whole scientific community is actually based on a complete separation from ourselves, and it's like almost taking our own mind and our own body and basically ourselves and looking at it through a microscope in physical reality, but never in that entire process realizing that we're actually looking at ourselves here, and that if we really want to find the origin point of why and how things exist, all we have to do is just be honest with ourselves about who we are and be honest with what we've allowed to exist within ourselves, such as fears. For instance, me being a female and reading things like this, like mass hysteria and all these girls that are in a group and that all of a sudden develop these motor tics and all of a sudden develop the same illness that is then called mass hysteria. I mean, when I'm honest with myself and I look back on my teenage years, for instance, to give a concrete example, when I was at camp, there was this other girl who I considered to be my friend, my best friend, and we were doing something like an exercise or a sports, and this girl started feeling unwell and she started developing this rash on her body because of a certain soap we were using within the exercise, where we were like in our bathing suits and we were playing around with soap and everything. And so she started feeling unwell and developing a rash, which was basically her physical experience within it. And like within myself, I just wanted to be her friend and I wanted to be close to her and I wanted to keep my relationship with her stable. And so what did I do is I started to all of a sudden also develop this rash, and I started also feeling unwell, and all of a sudden I started becoming sensitive to the soap, and all of a sudden I started to experience a burning sensation on my body, and just so that I could basically be with her and go with her to go and to go and sit in a tub of water and get the soap off of our body, just so that I could be able to be with her and establish my relationship with her, which is a pre-programmed point of like a social structure within the female mind as a survival mechanism. And so, I mean, this can be simply seen through applying self-honesty, simply being honest with yourself about where I stand within what I do and how I experience myself, where I actually realized that, this wasn't some kind of illness or disease or something that was just happening to me and that I have to take medication for. This was actually self-created. I was the starting point of my own illness, so to speak. I created it myself. And so what just happens is that, when we're children, we kind of go through these processes, these social manipulation processes or survival mechanisms in a more or less conscious way, where we kind of see what we're doing and we're doing it deliberately. But as we grow up, it's like these things become part of our unconscious or subconscious mind, and so we start to simply act on pre-programmed impulses, where we don't even realize anymore that the things we do and experience is entirely based on these social survival mechanisms that we've been building up all throughout our lives. And so we're not even aware anymore of what it is that we're doing. We're not aware anymore of the fact that we're doing it ourselves. And so we start to experience ourselves as the victim of our own fears and anxieties and illnesses and energetic experiences in our body and our own thoughts, our own feelings, our own emotions. I mean, and that's how all these different types of paranoias are developed within human beings, is that we simply are in no way aware of who we are within ourselves, or should I say, we in no way take responsibility for what we have allowed ourselves to create within ourselves due to the pre-programmed social survival mechanisms that we've allowed to accept, that we've allowed ourselves to accept within ourselves and have been living out all throughout our lives. Where in fact none of this is really happening to us, it's rather a point of where we have accepted and allowed this to exist within ourselves. And so the entire point now of these adult females experiencing mass hysteria and developing all these illnesses and disorders within and as mass hysteria, where these females now experience themselves as the victim of their entire illness or what they're experiencing now, is actually a point of simply not wanting to realize our responsibility towards ourselves, not wanting to be honest with ourselves, because in the back, way back in our mind, we kind of know, we kind of are aware of the fact that, you know, we're doing it ourselves, and we've basically been lying to ourselves our entire lives. We've been manipulating ourselves and our environment our entire lives, especially females. I mean, within how the female mind is designed within and as the social manipulation games that we play for survival, it's quite extensive. And so, I mean, the whole entire, where now the entire medication or drug industry is completely based on the human being not willing to take responsibility for itself, and the human being deliberately victimizing itself towards its own inner experiences of thoughts, emotions, and feelings. Where, for instance, you have articles like this, of which I will provide the link below the video. You have articles like this basically supporting the medical industry by writing about it from that perspective of, you know, we don't know where it's coming from, and we don't know what's happening to us, and what could it be, and why is that, and kind of like that whole starting point of what the scientific community does of completely separating ourselves from ourselves as our mind and our body, and investigating our mind and our body from the starting point of separation, rather than looking inwards and actually asking ourselves these questions of who am I within this, and you know, where is this coming from, and where is my starting point within this all? Who am I? Which is in complete support of the entire medical industry, the entire drug industry that uses this human unwillingness for taking self-responsibility and being self-honest to sell drugs and to make money and make profit. Where, I mean, it's no wonder that these sort of disorders, these kind of anxiety disorders, emotional disorders, mental disorders, you name it, that they only become worse. And why, for instance, this entire point of mass hysteria, which is supposedly an illness from the past, is now making its return through, for instance, social media, where now people are like more influencing each other's minds. So it's no wonder that all of this is becoming more and coming back and becoming more extreme, because the entire society that we're living in, that is based on making profit, where the medical industry, for instance, will in fact abuse our weaknesses, use our weaknesses against ourselves and exploit them, and so develop them even more. It's no wonder that the illnesses is becoming more and more severe, because of how we are allowing ourselves to be directed by our environment, to not in any way take responsibility for ourselves and be honest with ourselves, you know. And so the reason why I'm sharing all of this is because for a few years now I've been walking the Destiny I process, which is basically the process of being honest with myself, taking responsibility for myself, and actually where I'm reading these kind of articles, and it's and I'm absolutely flabbergasted with what I'm reading, and just how our entire society and way of living is entirely built around us not taking responsibility for ourselves, which is absolutely absurd. And so I'm speaking from a point of realizing that in fact we are responsible for ourselves, and in fact it is possible, and we have the ability and the possibility and the opportunity to cure ourselves in every way, simply by being honest with ourselves, by, for instance, stopping ourselves from constantly placing our trust in other people and the medical industry and the scientific community, and basically being honest with ourselves about the fact that we're doing it deliberately, that we never wanted to look inside ourselves, we never wanted to be intimate with ourselves, we never wanted to really face ourselves, because we really do know deep within ourselves that we're lying to ourselves, that we've been very manipulative beings, and so we just don't want to realize that. And so, I mean, none of all these illnesses would even exist if only our entire scientific community and medical industry were based on common sense, and would simply say to people, because that's in fact their responsibility, is to simply say to people, well, investigate yourself, ask yourself, who am I within this? What is this experience? Take responsibility for yourself. But obviously they don't do that because they want to make profit, and so they abuse people, and they abuse people's weaknesses because they can make money off of it, and then in turn people will use that point as a justification and an excuse to really believe about themselves, like, oh, I'm a victim of my own experiences, and so it's like an entire vicious circle or vicious cycle that is going on, which is completely unacceptable, because it's like we're driving ourselves into absolute insanity instead of stopping and taking responsibility for ourselves and just stopping this madness and realizing that, okay, we've been lying to ourselves, we've been manipulating ourselves and everybody around us. And so just forgive ourselves, because there is such a thing as forgiveness, self-forgiveness. And so simply forgive ourselves, release the point, and stand up and correct ourselves and actually become living beings that exist within and as absolute self-responsibility and self-honesty and integrity, where we don't so easily allow ourselves to be convinced into developing a mental or emotional illness, where we become the self-directive principle of who we are within and as ourselves. And so I'd suggest to investigate Destiny, where we do present support, real support, for beings that can relate and that are in some way honest enough with themselves that they can actually realize this point where, yes, I actually exist. We do actually exist. We are actually here. So, to just abdicate our responsibility to everything that we experience within ourselves is kind of just, that's just unacceptable, because it's like making the statement that, I don't really exist. All of this is just happening to me, where it doesn't, and it's not in fact. And so, investigate Destiny, and allow yourself the opportunity and the chance to actually change and to actually be able to see through the deception and the lies that we have allowed to exist within ourselves and this entire world and reality, so that we can truly stand up and change the world by changing ourselves, which is just what makes sense. Okay, so thanks.